टाइम भी बचाना है बट पॉडकास्ट से सीखना भी है. आप सही चैनल पर आ चुके हो. वेलकम टू TRS Clips. I'll name a chakra.
Sure.
And if you could give us like one actionable that people could do at home to help with the problems associated with that chakra. Is that okay?
Yes and no.
They can't do it at home.
Yeah, so I would say that so let's remember, like, here are a couple of reasons why. So first of all, when I teach this stuff, like, I'm working with a person. So and here's the concern that I have. There are certain medical contraindications to certain practices.
Gotcha.
So even something as simple as nadi shuddhi, which is, alternate nostril breathing, if you have something like a deviated septum, you can't do that practice. Kundalini sadhana, this is the other reason. The Kundalini practices are the most dangerous. So the activation there's like different kinds of meditation, right? There's some stuff that's like pretty safe and some stuff that is more powerful that is also more dangerous. So I had one when I was learning Kundalini practice, one of my teachers was like, I'm going to teach you like a practice to cleanse your Muladhara chakra. This is where the base desires come from. And he's like, but if I teach you this, like, you and I are going to go into the woods for 30 days. And when you do this, you're going to feel incredibly horny and you'll start assaulting anything that moves. So you can't do this practice here. So we have to leave the ashram, we have to go out into the woods, and then, we can do diksha and initiation. And what I realize now is that, there are case reports of meditation-induced psychosis and things like this. And so oftentimes what will happen is if you do these Kundalini practices, these intense yogic practices, that are not in the right way, you can have a bipolar break, you can become manic. So he was basically describing something in psychiatry that we call hypersexuality. So, and when someone has bipolar disorder and they become manic, they become like horny on a level that is like they're mentally not there. It's not just like, right, like they just can't control themselves. And so...
Like zombies.
Yeah. And then sometimes, so if we think about, if I have a spiritual experience and I see God and God is talking to me, there's a decent chance that I'll end up in the emergency room. Someone will inject me with antipsychotics. I've had patients that I've evaluated in the emergency room and they say, my chakras are open. That's why I'm here. And then I'll do a chakra assessment and I'll be like, no, I think you're psychotic. Like, I think this is...
Have you ever done a chakra assessment and the chakras are actually opened up?
On a patient?
Yeah.
There's only one time I can think of in the emergency room that I did a chakra assessment. And that was because the patient was saying this and I said, hi, my name is Alok. I know this is completely unscientific, but I know how to do a chakra assessment. Would you like me to do one? Because I'm not sure. Can we try to figure out together whether you're ill or your chakras are opening? Here's what I detect from your chakra assessment. I don't think your chakras are opening. I think you're psychotic. And I think that there's a negative influence happening on your mind. I would like to help you, right? I think this is what I'm seeing from a medical standpoint. You fit the criteria for psychosis.
In that case, what was the root cause?
I don't know because I evaluated them in the emergency room, right? So my job as a doctor there is to stabilize them and send them to a doctor who will help them figure out what was going on.
Did you by any chance check what was up?
So all I know is that they were not, in this particular case, it was not substance induced. So sometimes if you use substances, you can become psychotic, right? So like DMT or psilocybin, will create hallucinations. Cocaine can do it as well. THC can do it as well. Can create paranoia, psychosis, things like that.
Like a bad trip.
Bad trip, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with these dangers of the Kundalini practices, I'd love for you to give a narrative on what the spiritual teachings are about the dangers of Kundalini practices, and then give me what the likely science could be.
Sure. So first thing about Kundalini practice is that it involves a guru and diksha. So we have to understand these two terms. So a guru is like someone who is at the highest level enlightened, right? Someone who's attained moksha, but someone who is like competent as a teacher. And, to be a real guru, I mean, you've had some guests on the podcast that will know way more about this than I do. So I've received like tantric diksha and things like that, but so you have to be initiated into the practice. And the guru has to guide you, especially with Kundalini practices. And the whole reason is because as you do these practices and you start activating your chakras, they have to be cleaned. That's the other reason that I'm hesitant to just teach this stuff, because there's a cleansing process. And if you activate the energy and it's not cleaned, you can have problems like psychosis, mania, things like that.
But what's the dirt made up of?
What? That's a very interesting question. I would say, and this is going to open up a lot of doors, some amount of unclean prana, so your vital energies are not cleaned. Maybe some amount of samskar, some amount of karma, potentially. Like I would look at it from a couple of different layers. Those would be the three things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not like food that you're eating or experiences or drugs.
No, all of those things go into that, right?
Okay,
So let's understand. So if my prana is unclean, then maybe if I'm taking unclean food, if I have lots of trauma, then those will be samskars. So my mind and the impressions that have been left on me are not healthy. And then even karma, right? So like if I do drugs, that's going to have a karmic impact. So if I am doing Kundalini practice and I'm getting high every day, there's going to be a karmic consequence of these two things when I put them together.
Okay. Yeah. That's the spiritual lens on the subject.
Yeah. So here's the cool thing that I think a lot of people, this is what I get excited about and a lot of people miss, is when people say karma, they're like, oh, it's some spiritual force. No, this can be understood in scientific terms.
Like the biology of karma.
Biology of karma, absolutely. Right? So there is absolutely a karmic biology. If the patient I talked about, if I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes, my karma is to walk down the aisle with wheeling an oxygen tank behind me. Right? So karma is a very real cause and effect force that happens biologically. Yeah. So going back to your question of, how do you do Kundalini practice? So you have a guru, you get initiated. This is one of those things that I used to not believe in, that I now believe in, which I can't explain scientifically. There's a limit to, I think, what science can.
There's a need for a guru.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean.
But the caveat there is that, so I'm kind of on this path. So my teacher, the reason he taught me third eye practices is because he said, you're going to have difficulty finding a guru. So I'm going to teach you a practice to connect with what he called the inner guru. So once you do third eye practices first in one branch of Kundalini, because then you can get the guidance from the third eye itself.
Yeah. Guru Tattva. I mean, that's what we got.
So we can, Guru Tattva is very interesting.
You can manifest Guru Tattva inside you.
Absolutely.
That's a whole section we'll break down later.
Yeah, sure. So that's kind of how you learn them. So you have to have Diksha. And I think that Diksha is when is initiation. So that's when, I didn't understand this stuff, when a guru gives you a chunk of their spiritual energy. And so it's kind of like, the way I would think about it, the analogy that I would use is, if I want to have $1 million, if I start from zero and work really hard and I have all these expenses, right? I have to pay my rent, I have to pay for my car, I have to pay for my medical expenses. The ability to accumulate $1 million is very hard. If my parents give me $200,000 to start, they give me a down payment, a one-time injection of cash. They give me a down payment for a house. Even though they only gave me $200,000, my ability to get to $1 million is way easier. It's worth way more than 20%. Does that kind of make sense? That's what I think is the mechanism of Diksha. So when a teacher gives you a chunk of their spiritual energy, your ability to get to $1 million happens way faster, even though they're not getting you a lot of the way there. But it's just like getting that down payment to the house. Your financial situation is drastically different. It's worth way more than 20%. So that's kind of what happens. And then, the Kundalini sadhana, what was your question again precisely?
The biological dangers of Kundalini sadhana.
Yeah. So and I think because these practices are strong, they're things that are kind of scarier, right? So you're activating, they're more intense meditation. They're more intense practices. So you're doing these things like Ardha Siddhasan, where you are compressing some blood vessels, which you shouldn't do without guidance. So there's another, kind of scary practice where there's this little, if you look at your tongue is attached to the bottom of your mouth by a little...
Kechri Mudra.
Yeah, right? So we'll talk about, so Kechri Mudra. So Kechri Mudra is when you lift up your tongue, you push it against the back of your mouth, the top of your mouth, and then you push it up into the oropharyngeal cavity. So you're kind of sticking your tongue up towards the back. Yeah. Now, what's going to happen is when your tongue, you can only push it so far because it's attached to the bottom of your jaw with a little membrane. So there's a particular yogic practice where you cut that membrane and you use turmeric so it doesn't get infected and things like that. I would never recommend this, right? But that's an example of the more you do that, the more intense your Khechari Mudra can become, right? So how far up it goes depends on removing that membrane. The reason that I don't teach this stuff quickly is because these techniques are not meant to be taught quickly. They're done in a very particular way. If you screw that up, who knows what's going to happen? And if you screw up, navel chakra practices, your capacity to metabolize may get messed up. You could intensify traumas.
Yeah.
This I've seen specifically with trauma. So here's just a good example of sort of a Western side. See, when you have trauma, your mind has these things called defense mechanisms. So it'll do things like block out memories. And so your mind is trying really hard to keep things suppressed. Now, if I do some meditation practice where I'm removing all of these mental barriers so that I can clean my mind, the trauma will come flooding to the surface, and that can overwhelm me. So one thing that's really interesting, even if you look at the science of meditation practices used to treat trauma, they are all grounding practices. They're not something called open awareness practices where, you have some aspects of meditation where they're like, accept whatever thought comes. If you have a history of trauma and you let the thoughts come the way that just let every thought come, it's all okay. People who teach that have not had patients who've been abused since the age of 5. If you just let that stuff come, it'll overwhelm your mind. And so there's all kinds of stuff that's buried, right? So let's remember that when I have food poisoning, the process of getting that toxic food out of me, vomiting or diarrhea, is very unpleasant and can be dangerous in and of itself. If I have food poisoning, I vomit too much, I can die of dehydration. I can die of an electrolyte disturbance. So even though it's theoretically healing, if I'm not careful and it isn't done right, it can be more dangerous.
Like the only meditations that are suitable for everyone are grounding practices.
Basically. So the other practices that usually are safe, there's a set of yogic practices that are pretty safe. Grounding meditations is like the Western people, but things like Surya Namaskar, incredibly safe. Shuddhi practices, the basic Shuddhi practices, very safe. So this is like Nadi Shuddhi, like alternate nostril breathing, incredibly safe. Things like Kapalbhati, bellows breath, some of these other practices really safe. Basically what you would learn in a yoga class or pranayama class is pretty safe. These aren't Kundalini. And then other things, there are introductory practices. So one practice that's very safe to do for Agnya Chakra is candle gazing, Trataka.
Yeah.
So fixed point gazing. So this is just looking at a candle flame without blinking for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Then you kind of work your way up. And then, there's a second phase of that practice. Once you do it on a candle flame, then if you want to make it more Kundalini oriented, then you can do it on a yantra, right? A yantra for a particular chakra.
I think all this needs a guru.
Yes, for the most part. I think guru is the safest way. There's a reason why we've had gurus for thousands of years, right? But doing candle gazing is something that I can teach to a patient without activating any chakra.
Yeah.
And then if they get activated, then that's part of their karma, and that's supposed to happen. And then we kind of guide them through that if it happens. But right. And then if someone comes to me and is like, I want to learn Agnya Chakra practice, then I'll be like, okay, let's start with candle gazing. Then let's do yantra practice. Then let's learn a mantra. Let's combine all of those things. But that's not something that I would quickly give.
You're a wild guy. Love it. Love this, man.
It's great. Like I love that this stuff actually like works. There's like a system.
Yeah. Back to the Kundalini. So you're saying that the dangers are that some of the meditations that you need to put one through for awakening the Kundalini might trigger traumas from the past, might trigger some kind of psychosis.
All kinds of stuff, right?
Gotcha.
And there's evidence of that.
And this is a psychiatrist, like a qualified
Yeah.
psychiatrist giving this piece of information to us.
Yeah, just to give you one tiny example, I know you're trying to summarize, but so there's a study that shows that the risk of psychosis increases if you meditate for 40 minutes or more.
Ooh, for anyone.
So this is a population-based study. So the methodologies that they'll look at everyone who had bad experiences with meditation, and then they'll ask them, how do you meditate? And one of the things that floats to the surface is people who meditate for 40 minutes or more are at a higher risk of problems.
And yet, the life changes that meditation gives you is when you take meditation up to that level.
Exactly. Precisely the point I wanted to make, right? So the stuff that is dangerous is the same as the stuff that is the most effective, which is why a guru is important.
Thanks for watching TRS clips. Make sure to explore the channel. ऐसे ही बहुत सारे clips upload करें. You'll keep working out your brain as you keep exploring the channel.